Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Growers Live. I'm Josh Satin. Very excited to be here, as always. Very special guest tonight, Spencer Rudolph from Sage Hill Ranch Gardens. One of my favorite farmers, especially because I got to visit Spencer earlier this year, which seems like an eternity ago, and I can't wait to hear about all the new things he's got going on. Also, there's a lot of really cool footage that we shot with Spencer at his farm, both on my channel. I did a much longer interview, and there's a bunch of details about really nerdy stuff going on at Spencer's farm too. So on the No Till Growers channel. So lots of cool stuff for you guys to check out there. I'm using new software tonight, so bear with me if I have some issues. It's going to add some flexibility and some new features, and hopefully it will be better. I'm really trying to sort of up the game here a little bit with Growers Live and just streams in general. I think it's been really cool, and especially with COVID, we can connect with people all over the place. And when I talk to growers and invite them on the show, everyone's always super excited. So I think it's not just, it's us too. Like, we like getting together and chatting and sharing stuff. And so it feels really special. And we're going to keep doing this every other Tuesday. So with that in mind, not too many other announcements. Just remember again that this show and a lot of the work that we do at No Till Growers is brought to you by you guys, the Patreon members. I see more and more people signing up there, and we really appreciate it. And we're going to be bringing out a lot of new stuff for you guys. Jesse hinted at a couple new podcasts coming out. I'm not going to spoil any more details there. And then obviously a bunch of really cool stuff for next year that I'm really excited about. And if you haven't been following along on my channel too, I just want to give you guys an update about me personally. I'm going to be leaving Raleigh City Farm at the end of the month and going back to farm at my house again. And so I'll be sharing that experience with everybody. And if you haven't seen that already, I just want to let you guys know that too. But anyways, let's get Spencer in here. So do that in 1 second. Spencer, good evening.
How's it going, Josh?
I hope that gets you fired up, man. That gets me fired up watching that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I was thinking about this show, and I'm like, I gotta bring some other video elements in. First of all, thanks for coming on tonight. I felt so lucky going to visit you guys. And for you guys who don't know, we were out there, and Jesse and I were out there in February for our workshop that we did, and then we got to visit Spencer. And man, your place is like no other. It really is.
Yeah.
Not just for the physical part of the farm, but you and your hospitality and your family. I mean, your whole family was there, and it was super cool. So yeah, if you can tell everyone here a little bit about your farm and what you guys do first, and then we can get into some more details.
So first of all, I'm in Southern California, about 45 minutes north of San Diego. I run a in total production, half-acre market garden, specializing in salad greens. In total, the entire farm is 3 acres, but like I said, in production, we have about a half acre of bed space totaling. Yeah.
Okay. And I can't stress enough, it's funny, the experience I had at Raleigh City Farm this year, and everyone's like, oh, all the issues. And I think about your farm. You had everything going against you guys. You had your farming on the steepest slope I could even imagine.
Yeah.
You're trying to grow in DG, if people don't know, is ground up rock.
Yeah,
you have no water essentially, or very expensive water.
Yeah, our water is an issue. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I think of that, and to have the production you guys had. So I put that in perspective. Sometimes I think
you can do it anywhere. You can make it happen.
You can make it happen. Yeah, I say that a lot, but it's the hard work, determination, and your attention to detail has just been. I don't know. Jesse and I left for a long time. We're just like, man, that place was incredible. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's awesome that we can connect now and chat more about farming. And I can't wait to hear about all the things that have changed at your farm. But first of all, let's talk about the obvious thing. What's going on with COVID right now for you guys?
Yeah. We pretty much just went right back into a lockdown. So I think where we left off even on the podcast last with you guys, we pretty much 2 weeks later or 2 to 3 weeks later went into the first lockdown, and then just now they just issued another stay-at-home order and fully closed down a good chunk of almost all of our restaurants except for takeout. And we have one of our restaurants, like Enclave, shout out to Enclave if they're watching, but they're cranking out like 600 meals a day to seniors. And so they're crushing it. But that's one of our restaurants. Pretty much all the other restaurants that we have are gone at this point, or just closed down for the time being. So it's super hard. It's super hard in that aspect of trying to figure out crop production and figure out how to navigate when there's such an up and down, and you don't want to end up with waste and things like that.
Yeah. So I remember, I think with the podcast, because Jesse did like a little update. Did you guys switch to some sort of online ordering or CSA type deal, or?
Yeah. So we went to some online order CSA where you can almost customize and build your own box. And we were doing really well at that and everything like that. But I think everyone's kind of gone, since we haven't been in like an established CSA or anything like that, and wasn't like a lock a member in or anything like that. It was a come as you go type CSA. It's tapered off, and I also think that people have gotten more comfortable and like gone back to grocery stores and things like that. In the beginning, everyone was really trying to eat healthy, and they're all nervous, but it makes sense. Rightly so. We're
past the healthy point now. We're like, give me the comfort food, give me the junk food, I guess.
Yeah, bring on the booze.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think there was a big rush on CSAs, which I think was great for everything, for that sort of acknowledgement about local food and sustainability and all that. And I know that people were like, small farms couldn't like grow stuff fast enough this spring.
Yeah, I think it was cool because it brought the attention back to it. I was hoping that people would kind of maintain that attention. It's hard because, grocery stores are very convenient.
Absolutely. So what are some, first of all, if you haven't already, go check out some of the videos after we're done with this. We did a video on bed prep, which I think was my favorite video. One of my favorite videos I made this year. Like it was really cool. And if you guys haven't seen that, it was like you and a couple of your guys were flipping. Jesse was hopping in, and like I don't think there was a cut in the video. Like it was so dynamic. It was awesome. We did one about your terracing, about your tools. Their tomato system is really cool. A lot of just really nifty, really thought out systems at your farm. And one thing I want to point out, I know I'm talking too much. One thing I want to point out was the way you guys flip beds as a team. That I think you called it relay race.
Yeah.
I kind of incorporated that with my interns this year, and like really encourage that, like, what's next, get that thing ready so that the process does. Man, we can flip so many beds. Like
it starts to like it stacks real nicely too. It like moves the crew through the fields so you can get to the next project.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, so like a main part of our focus too is always that, we have X amount of beds to flip a week. And then since we're on, we have 140, 50 foot beds. And at any given time during the main season, we have about 16 beds that need to be opened up each week to be transplanted. A lot of crops that we're doing is our short-term crops. We do like maybe 3 cuts on salad, but then we're flipping it. So like I said, any given time, we have about 16 beds opened up. And then at that point, we are, that's nice.
Yeah, I was going to put this on while you're talking.
Yeah, nice. But yeah, so then, like I said, we're just trying to move through these bed flips as quickly as possible. So the fact that we have to, on Mondays, open these beds up. Tuesdays, we're harvesting. And then by Wednesday, we are transplanting back in the field, leaving the beds blank for no more than a day. We try and keep as much living plants in the ground as possible at this point too. That's one of the new systems. Like during summer that we tried, which was really fun, was a zero flip bed. It was actually a really cool experiment that we tried, which is where we covered. We had a bed of arugula, cut it back down to really low, and then we covered it with a black silage tarp, just a single 50-foot bed. That's common. Most people do that, right? But one thing that we did was came back and without even just pulling back the tarp without removing any stubble or anything like that, we gridded over the top of that and transplanted directly into that without adding any amendments, any compost, nothing to it. The crop grew quicker. The one noticeable change that was really significant for us was that we didn't have to water in. So transplanting the crop, never even had to water the plants. We never even had to water the transplants in. Left them for 2-3 days, still good. The soil moisture content was like skyrocketing. It was insane.
So what was going out and what were you guys putting in?
We transplanted. We went from arugula to baby bok choy.
Okay.
And then, but like I said, the fact that the surface of, I think, so we run the tilter through. You'll see that in this video, we actually run the tilter through. When we do that, we're obviously destroying the soil aggregates, but I think what it does is it loosens it up obviously enough to, and aerates it. So it dries the top 2 inches out. So when we left it covered, one, the soil was soft enough because of all the worms to transplant directly into. Normally we'll use a tilter just for ease of transplant. Without tilting it, just covering it, the soil is soft enough where we could literally stick our fingers right into it and transplant easily. But the soil moisture content was soaking wet for the next 3 days without using any water. It was extremely interesting to see that. And like I said, I think the tilter aerates it and then dries that top inch out where you have to water in.
Well, because it definitely fluffs it up, and then the wind can come through and dry it out.
It was just an extremely interesting observation to see that the soil content, water content, was like really wet on top, long enough to where you didn't even have to water in your transplants. I thought that was very interesting.
So is that a one-time thing, or is that part of the procedure now?
That was a one-time thing, and then we went right into our fall where it gets the ground too cold and it took too long to fill the bed like that. It would take so we would cover. It took about 7 days from cover to transplant. From cutting the arugula, covering it, and then to transplant, it was 7 days. During fall, it would take too long. It would take about 2 weeks. I need the bed space at that time.
Yeah, it definitely slows down. I was doing a lot of that covering with like a 4-foot section of landscape fabric.
Yeah,
and I noticed that it really speeds up if you put down some compost, and for me, like wetting it and then covering it, that makes it a lot faster.
Yeah, so we tried it with compost. Actually, I remember that. So we tried it with compost, and our compost is like extremely dry. It comes just really, like I said before, it comes very hydrophobic. So it's almost like a fine dust, and the soil it didn't get wet. It just wouldn't absorb the soil moisture content like it did in the without putting it down.
Okay, and so yeah, I think there's more experimentation with. I know it sounds funny, but like less work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly, and that was kind of the idea. Is like if we just did like a 0 flip bed, and we went directly from one crop to the next without adding any amendments, adding any compost, and it turned out great. The crop was on time. It was healthy. It was and it was less pest on it too, which is even more interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy. So the rest of the process, is it kind of similar to what you guys have been doing, like what we're seeing in the video here?
Same things. Staking, stringing.
Okay.
Compost, peat moss, all that. We actually went away from peat moss to just look at the one-time application in the beginning of the year. And then now this year, what we're trying to do is I have horses on site, horses and goats on site. And so we have a static pile going from the beginning of the year to now. And that static pile has been building. And so we're going to use that as our organic matter. Our compost comes, like I said, it's a very fine compost, very nutrient-based compost. There's not much to it other than just being like a fine dust. There's not much organic matter in it. Sounds very strange, but when you see it, it's like a powder. You can kind of see him pouring that out right there. It's like a real fine powder. But what did I say? Yeah, so what we're doing is having a static pile of horse manure and goat, along with all the excess waste from bed flips and things like that, kind of on a static pile.
Okay.
And one of my guys today actually was telling me about how the benefits of a static pile. There might be better benefits to having a static compost pile versus a pile that is constantly turned. Something that takes 2 years to make versus 6 weeks. There might be better nutrients in the static, higher amounts of nutrients. That's
very interesting. I have another story about that, but I don't need to talk about that right now. Very cool. Well, it's good to know that, like, when I was there, the system was so like streamlined and dialed in. It seems it's cool that you do it for a while, and I know you're the kind of guy that's like, okay, what can we tweak here? What can we make better?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, to this point, there's not much other than like that no flip bed, which is during summer, that's something that we'll definitely be going back to because it was just pull a tarp out over it and it was done. And then we went back in with it was no cost for amendments, and so that to me was like, okay, but that's probably something that we'll implement during summer when you have the heat.
That heat, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm going to try to incorporate that as much as we started to this year. Sometimes, like if we were really in a rush, we'd put down a little bit of compost and some water, and it would definitely break down faster.
Yeah.
But otherwise, just like harvest it really low and just cover it. And all that goes back into the ground.
The other thing too that we might like, the better our soil gets, the more organic matter, it leans itself more towards not having to use a tilter either. It's loose enough to where we can. The only reason why we use a tilter at this point is to make ease for transplant, and then to obviously mix the amendments. But I mean, I think if you just covered with that no flip method, it's like I think we might get away with not having to do much.
All right, we're kind of on the same page here because I'm like towards the end of this season, I'm like, can I stop using the tilter?
Yeah.
And I think my thoughts about it, it's incredible. I love that tool. Like I love it, but I feel like sometimes I love it because I'm a human.
Yeah,
and I feel. Definitely. You want to talk about that, or do you have the same thought?
I totally get that. I think that's something that we tend to, as humans, that's our flop. We like see how it's a nice clean slate in that video. We like to see. That's why we plow and disc. Is that we like to see. Oh, it's a clean slate. Now we can work it. First, I think that's our flop as human beings, that we tend to do too much.
And I've never owned a tiller, so I don't even have that addiction. Right. But the tilter is like a mini tiller. I mean, it goes down like an inch and a half.
Yep.
And when every time I run it, I'm like, oh, it looks so good. But, all right. So probably using it less, or you think for certain situations?
So, I mean, like I said, next year will be year 4, but then on some of the plots it's still like year 1, but it would be like year 4 on some of the older ones, and at that point they're pretty much at the point where we could do away with it. But it also comes down to the other thing I was leaning as what seeders if we're direct seeding, what seeders are we going to use? If I use this the 6-row pinpoint, it can't exactly. It does need that smooth bed. So there'll be times where it's more practical to use the tilter just for seeding purposes. But if we're transplanting, you could probably get away with not using it. At least using it every bed flip, maybe doing it like maybe every 2 to 3 bed flips.
Yeah.
When you're adding amendments and things like that, I think that's one thing we'll get away from too. Is not every bed flip adding our soil amendments.
Are you changing your amendments based on like what's coming out or going in, or just it's like every bed sort of gets treated the same way?
Yeah. So at this point, every bed gets treated the same way, and that's because our amendments that we're using is just all the fish meal, bone meal, well, not bone meal, but fish meal, feather meal, alfalfa. They're more adding. It's more of a instead of like a fertilizer, I would call it more of like a soil amendment because they're just more feeding the microbial life and things like that.
Okay.
We lean more towards heavy on seaweed and actually in our blend now too. I was telling you about that earlier, but
yeah. You want to talk a little bit about those amendments? And
I'm watching Jesse too.
I know. I mean, partly I love these videos. I mean, obviously I told you earlier this is like one of the best videos that we did this year, but on No Till Growers. But it's funny because like that day is so clear in my mind. Like. Even though it seems like forever ago. Jesse, in this video, if you guys haven't seen this, Jesse's like, I've never used the tilter before. Yep. Do you want to talk about any of those amendments and like how that's...
one of the things that we started to add into the blend itself is biochar.
Are you making that or are you buying that from somewhere?
We're buying that from, it's called Black Owl Biochar. I think it's a local company. Actually, our compost company makes biochar. I found that out about 3 weeks ago. So we'll start purchasing that because it's the same compost and their biochar, which I thought was pretty cool.
Okay.
And then we started to go heavier on kelp, like a powdered kelp. We started to go a little heavier on that inside the blend, which I see is make a big noticeable difference too.
Okay.
In crop growth.
Cool. So what are some other, maybe I'll take this video off.
I watch it.
I know you're getting distracted and I am too, but what are some other things that have changed on your farm? If people like have seen some of the videos, like I know you guys were working on that like lower area, maybe putting another tunnel in. Did that happen?
Yeah, no. So our tunnel, we're actually constructing our own personal tunnel, our own 14-foot wide for, I think, hopefully we're trying to get in before January. But one thing that we implemented this year was a shade structure, a 30 by 110 foot shade structure that was about 15 to 18 feet off the ground. And that made a big difference during summer on the heat on our soil. It was, maybe 100, 105 out, and the temperature in there was drastically lower, and the plants showed it too, the veg.
Can you talk a little bit how you put that together?
Yeah, so we actually strung it with. If you've seen my setup with my tomatoes, where we have the long 9-gauge cable, we actually off that raised it up 2 more feet and ran this little it's like piano wire, like zigzagging it back and forth, and then we actually came down on the sides and ran up on T stakes like a 2-inch galvy, and then ran it side by side on that. And so we just created like a net for the shade net to sit on top of.
Okay. Are you still using those EMT like TPs or whatever?
No. So this is
okay.
So nothing. There was nothing obstructing in the middle and underneath it. It's all raised above it. So when you walk underneath, you don't have to move around anywhere. You free walking. There's no poles or anything underneath there. So
that's amazing. And cool. I think there has to be more people trying to figure these things out, because I think shade cloth is.
Oh, it's huge. We're going to be doing that on every single one of our field plots for next year.
Wow.
The growth was exponential. Like once we get anything past 90, the soil on our hillside gets like starts going backwards. It's so hot. You can see it. You see the plants. They're not putting out anything, and so the shade made a big difference. To where it's like, okay, that's something that we'll be definitely doing for every field plot.
Yeah, I noticed going from my farm where it's kind of surrounded by trees, and then at the Raleigh City Farm, it's completely open, and we get sun. Like if the sun's up, it's sunny there. Yeah. And I just was like as soon as the temperature changed in the fall, like everything just started growing again. Yep. It was struggled all summer. Yeah, I'm a firm believer in shade cloth.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. And like I said, and then I was telling you earlier, when it's something about having it lifted that high up off the ground that the light reflected in from the sides made the growth greater too, because we were operating with a 30% shade that was almost acting like a 10%, if that makes sense. Because when we would cover it so if we laid down a 9-gauge wire and then covered our transplants with the 30% and it laid directly on the ground, no light was able to get up from the sides, the growth underneath would get extremely leggy, and the product wouldn't turn out correctly, right? Once we lifted it up to about 15 feet, like I said, the light coming in from the sides, it was like at a 10% shade. So
that's cool. Was it pretty inexpensive to put that together?
The shade cloth is not inexpensive.
No, that stuff's not cheap. Yeah.
But the 9-gauge is just labor, and then the 9-gauge wire, or not 9-gauge wire, but the piano wire. That was a little bit pricey, more than I thought it was going to be. But then it's just a labor cost. So not too bad, not terrible, but the production outweighed the cost, definitely.
Okay. And definitely get multiple seasons out of it. So
yeah. Oh yeah. I think you can get, I think it's like 6 seasons, they say, out of the shade cloth, which is nice.
So I think about like someone like myself or someone growing in the Southeast. For us, like if you have a tunnel, you can cover that with shade cloth and get a very similar effect. But you guys it doesn't rain where you guys are for like.
We've gotten like a fraction of a rain in like 8 months.
Okay. So if I was in your situation, I would just go for open shade cloth. But like for us here, like the rain is the hardest thing for us.
Yeah. And the tunnel adds a little bit more control for you too. Like since you're getting rain, we have not gotten any rain, which is pretty. It's kind of like, in a sense, eerie. And when you start to grow food and you start to realize how long it's been since it's rained, it's like, oh man, like, so I mean that kind of leads me towards like we've actually just finished setting up one of our water restoration programs inside my pack house, where any water that we're using inside our pack house is now being filtered and then stored into a 10,000 gallon tank. So we're now catching everything inside that pack house, and we guttered our pack house and guttered our greenhouse to now catch any rainwater that comes from there, to store it and then reuse it back on the farm.
Okay, I remember you talking about that when we were there. Yeah, because you didn't want to waste all the wash water. So that's all in operation now.
Yeah. So we got that up and running. We're not using as much water as I thought we would be using in our pack house. I thought for sure we were losing a lot more water. We were, so we've had it up for about 6 weeks, and we're out about 8,000 gallons being stored in 6 weeks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I thought we were pumping out way more, but it's kind of, I don't know. Have you ever metered or like seen how much water you used on your farm before on the farm?
Kind of, because we have at the city farm, we have 2 5,000 gallon tanks that catch rainwater. And I was kind of keeping track of like when it got empty and when the city water kicked in to like keep some, Yeah, you go through so much water when you irrigate.
Dude, no, okay. So we since we're on city water, in August being our highest month of water usage, we went to a crazy number. We went up almost to 280,000 gallons of water usage in 1 month. 280,000 gallons in 1 month.
Okay, so how many beds do you have?
140.
50-foot beds?
50-foot beds, yeah.
Okay, because your acreage, I don't even want to talk about acreage. I don't understand it at your farm. So number of beds is
It's, I mean, we're at a half acre, but that in 1 month to use 280,000 gallons. We have a 10,000 gallon tank. You couldn't fit that on 3 acres. It was the water usage was insane. So it's just like recognizing that made it more imperative for us to have this program, but we're actually storing as much water as we can and saving it, and then looking more towards the future of growing with a perennial tree crops. So leaning more towards something that wouldn't require as much water usage as like a leafy green or something like that. So that's leading to the next thing is going forward. We're actually going to be implementing more perennial tree crops on site as well too.
okay. As long as you guys grow more avocados, because no joke, those are some of the best avocado. I think it was the best avocado I've ever had.
Good to hear.
Yeah, like
it's really sweet and buttery.
Yeah, we got to the airport, and Jesse and I like had our bags were just full of like oranges and avocados, and everyone was like, "What is?" Like the security guys were like, "What's going on here?"
Yeah.
That's cool. And so I know we're just talking a lot, but guys, if you have questions, get them in the chat. I'm going to ask Spencer a couple more questions, and then we'll go on the Patreon questions. But one more thing, I had a lot of stuff I wanted to ask you about, but one was overhead and drip.
Oh yeah.
And your experience with that, because if you guys don't know, like Spencer's in Southern California, very dry. As we mentioned, water is a big issue. So what are some of the things you've been changing?
Yeah. So we were operating with drip, which is water saving, water conserving. But we do farm very differently in the sense that compared to other people, we're always raising our organic levels to maximum. We don't till. We try our best not to, we use a tilter, but we try our best not to do any type of deep soil inversion. And so we're keeping our soil, our soil organic matter at extremely high levels. So what I was noticing, and we also broad fork, what I was noticing when we ran the drip was very, it's like a very focal point, and their drip would go in, it wouldn't expand out. Like I see other growers, when they use a drip, their drip would expand across the surface. Our drip would go in and down. I think that was from broad forking. But so we switched to using overhead. Our cost of water went down. The soil, the reaction from the crops went up. The growth was exponential. And I think that's because, like I said, when we were keeping that top surface, 3 inches completely wet, all of our amendments are right there on the top. The root surface of most crops that we grow are very surface level, and so they're spreading out left and right. When we were using the drip would be focal point into like one spot, and the roots would go to that spot, focal point, and that's it. And everything else would be extremely dry around it. So when we kept that 30-inch bed, the entire surface moist, the roots had access to all that nutrients at one point. So the growth went up exponentially. I recommend to other growers in Southern California, if you're using like a no-till method or things like that, to experiment with something like that, because I think we see everyone using drip out here, and you think that's the only way to go. And from my personal experience in the last like 6 months, it's been, one, saving more water because we don't have to use as much water now, and two, the growth in crops has been exponential.
Do you think that has to do with the fact that your soil probably looks like no one else around you?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think that, go ahead.
So if you treat your soil right, you end up saving yourself money, and your product's going to show for it too. So
you mentioned that the plants grew better, but did you actually see a measurable difference in the amount of water you're using too?
Oh yeah, no, it went from like we can see month to month on how many units we're using. Our unit went down almost by 20 units.
Wow,
that's a lot. I mean,
yeah.
One unit is like 700 gallons or maybe more.
Okay.
So I mean, I think.
Right. I think that this is a great example of, there are these like rules in farming that sometimes you got to question them and think differently, because I think a lot of the ways that we're farming is different than conventional agriculture.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that like examples like that, everyone would be like, oh, you got to use drip. You got to save water. But maybe you don't. Okay,
Yeah.
good to
But
know.
if your soil you have to have the organic matter to do that.
Okay.
If your organic matter content level wasn't high and you were trying that, you would be wasting more water because it's going to go straight through. The soil's not going to hold that moisture.
So I assume if you had a very sandy soil, it would probably be similar.
Yeah, you would want to use drip for that if it was sandy soil.
Right. Or clay. I mean, clay is a different story altogether too. But okay, cool. I'm gonna get to some questions, and then if we run out of questions, I have more questions for you, Spencer. But we can. This is the best thing. I get to just nerd out about farming for a while. And anyways, so as you guys know, if you watched the show before, the first thing we do is take questions from our Patreon members, and then we open up for questions on the chat. So if you guys have questions in the chat, please drop them in, and I'll get to those in a few minutes. So first question here is from Daniel Morales, and it says, can you walk through as specific or vaguely as time and Josh allows your process of converting the hill into a terraced landscape? I have some interested in doing the same in New York. I'm assuming not advisable when the ground is about to freeze. I don't think that's an issue where you are, but you recommend a big amending and cover cropping period to restore soil health after everything's in place?
Yep. Okay, so
I know there's a lot of questions in there, so
and I'll take it from there. The one thing I recommend is that any type of like big earth moving, you take place to right in the beginning, and then go from definitely get all your terraces set in place, and then cover crop, and then from there go from any type of soil amendments you want to go from there. When you're moving the earth, what you want to do is you're going to start at the top and then work your way down the hill. And then my other recommendation would be always to think bigger on your plateaus and your terraces than more. I'll just do a few small ones. If you could do a few small ones, you might want to just cut into one bigger one. It's just gonna, in the long run, it's gonna be more beneficial to have one straight long 50-foot bed versus 60-foot, 70-foot, 30-foot type thing going on.
Okay, and then is there a better time of year maybe? Like it would be better?
I mean, out here, you can go anytime you want out here, but
which is not always good. Like it's a blessing and a curse, I feel like, to farm all year.
Yeah, it's true. It is true. For them, spring, summer.
Okay.
Maybe you want to do it in summer and then cover crop it. Well, it depends if you get snow. But
they're in New York, so probably.
Yeah.
And then, so after, I know you have different soil than Daniel's probably got in New York, but can you talk a little bit about so you move the earth, you do that big disturbance, you create your areas. Would you have done it differently? I remember you talking about using a lot of peat moss and putting that in the ground. Would you have done more cover crops maybe now?
Absolutely. I think so. We have two field blocks side-by-side comparison of one with to start the field, we did a cover crop, and then one we just used compost and peat moss. And then the first round of the lower field with compost and peat moss, the first round of veg that went into it was essentially the cover crop. We did one with the cover crop, start from start to finish, and then add all the soil amendments, tilled that in, and then tarped it, pulled it back, and then shaped the beds. That field plot is exponentially different in growth in between the crops, and I think that was from the cover crops, the deep rooted systems going down and then creating those aggregates. I think that was a huge part of making the success of that field. And that being said too, I think with going forward, we're going to be implementing in our field blocks, we'll designate 2 50-foot beds on each one to be a cover crop per season, and then we'll just rotate those through like it was a cash crop itself. Because I think that getting that deep-rooted system of the cover cropping is super essential.
And cover cropping is nothing new, but I feel like I'm hearing more and more talk about it in farmers in their second, third, fourth year. After you get going, you're like, okay, how can I really crank this up?
Yeah. Well, I read a book this year too called Dirt to Soil by Gabe Brown, which is a big no-till grower. I think that guy's doing some pretty cool things. And he talks about different polyculture cover crops and how important those are. And that kind of turned my eye to it as well too. And then same with Daniel Mays with Frith Farms. What he's doing is incredible.
Yeah, I think it's hard, I think, for a lot of market gardeners who are on really small farms to give up beds. Yeah. I think that was definitely me at my farm here before I left. I was like, I don't have time for this. But I think you got to start thinking about that within a year or two, trying to work it into your system.
Yeah. Well, at this point too, you can almost look at the cover crop as it essentially is a cash crop because it's going to pay out in the long run, And so I think that's the good way to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And what are some things, I know like climate's very different, but what are some cover crops you guys have been like using?
So right now we're experimenting covering the slopes with a clover, just kind of choke out any type of. We have a hard time weeding our slopes. You've seen our slopes are super steep. So we've been using a clover for that to kind of choke those out, and then hoping that just kind of establishes itself so we don't have to do weeding on the slopes.
So you're talking about not the bed space, like everything else.
Yeah. So that's the sides. But now in the bed space, we're looking to do like a pea vetch and oat kind of a cover crop. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right, let's get to another question here. Joseph is asking about organic solutions for lettuce drop, but maybe we can talk about any sort of lettuce issues that you have, and like maybe or if you haven't, like what do you think are some successes that have kept your lettuce healthy?
I don't have. I mean, our lettuce. I haven't had a big issue with lettuce. Just kind of selecting varieties. Variety is a big important part. Which one's kind of going to be most suitable? Making sure they all grow at the same pace, things like that. Cultivating. I mean, since they're cultivated crops, cultivation is always welcome for those. Let's see. I'm not sure. I mean, that's.
What are some varieties you've been liking?
I always go with the green incise, Salanovus. Salanovus, pretty much.
Okay.
Good ones to go with.
Okay.
But I think we're gonna. Yeah, Salanovus.
Are you using the gritter for the spacing?
Yeah. Grid. Oh, and so actually, the gritter's a big one. One thing that we started to do, kind of like playing off of Jared Rufields down in San Diego as well. He does a multi-species bed where he plants
interplanting, intercropping,
cropping. So we actually used the gritter and then we intercropped with the gritter, which was so the gritter helped us out where we stayed on grid, but we're still able to grid out. So we did like a 2x2 with kales and then gridded out the 4x4 with like red gems or something like that.
Okay, so go through that example again so people can follow.
So with the gritter, we're able to, because I'm not with intercropping, I'm still like a very structured person where I need to be on line, it needs to be straight, things like that.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So with the gritter, we're able to intercrop of this still maintain straight. So when you're coming through with like Colnier hoe, you're not dodging plants and things like that. But we're able to take, so if you use the 4x4 gritter, the 4x4 actually doubles to the 2x2 as well. So rolling it out, you still get that 2x2 spacing on the 4x4 grid. Does that make sense? So we did our 2 plantings of, or 2x2 planting of kale, and then on grid still we came through and did the 4x4 like red gem romaines. On the outer 2 ones or all the way through? So we did a 4x4 across, still maintaining. I'm sorry, it would be outside 2 and inside 2, skipping the kale. We skip the kale, and then after the kale you get your 4x4 grid. Okay. I'll take a photo. I'll post it. All right. I love the interplanting stuff, and I think I'm gonna start implementing the gritter too. But one thing I've noticed with the 4x, that's what, 7.5 inches. Is that right? Like in between. I think it's 6. I think it's about 6. Okay. Pretty tight. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. I thought it was a little bit wider. I always plan at 6 inches, and I just wish I had a little bit more room. So I haven't measured. I feel like it's like 30 divided by 4. I think maybe. That's 7.5. Yeah. The gritter though was a big change. Change for our farm. Once we got that, we were able to standardize a lot of our systems, our greenhouse, everything. We knew how much was going to come out of the greenhouse, going in the field exactly the same every time. So there's no overseeding or anything like that. Okay. Yeah. So your recommendation is variety, good cultivation, overheads. Overhead, if you for. All right, so let's hold on a second. You have no humidity, so that's a different story. My climate is like perfect. Yeah, it's perfect for growing. That's why all the lettuce comes from like California and Arizona. Yeah. But for more humid environments, like, do you think with your switch from drip to overhead, do you think? I guess you don't have that experience, but with lettuce, maybe you have to do drip to keep it a little drier. Possibly. I mean, I think I did see somewhere where JM said they were having issues with something where he was thinking about switching to drip on something. I thought that was kind of interesting to see. someone so northern talk about switching the drip.
Okay. And then just to follow up on that conversation, you're still using drip for like bigger crops, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like tomatoes, peppers, your nightshades, things like that. Definitely going to use drip. Don't like the overhead on the leaves and things like that for that.
Okay. Okay, cool. And you just have the one nursery still, or did you guys put up more greenhouses?
No, just the one nursery. We were planning to be implementing the hopefully a 14 by 100 foot long.
Okay.
Tunnel. I think we're gonna make it more permanent though, and that's less of a cat tunnel, but more of a permanent tunnel. And we might have to do 3 of those, one for each one of our biggest terraces.
I remember when I was there, you guys were clearing out that lower spot. You were going to try to put a tunnel down there. At least I think that's what you told me when we were there.
Yeah. Well, that turned into our tomato field. We had like a huge, like, big issue in spring was that I seeded all my tomatoes. It was like some 600 tomatoes, and I had nowhere to take, no field space to take them. And so we, like, within like 2 weeks, made a decision to put it in the new field plot, and then made the system. It was just and then COVID was happening. So it was
right.
It was the biggest mess ever, but our tomatoes turned out just fine. And first year,
if I should have had that photo. You sent me some unbelievable photos of your tomato production. I don't have that ready to share with everybody, but yeah, it's awesome. All right, so let me get to this question here. This is from John Taylor, the Daily Market Farm. What are some of your biggest challenges growing on this landscape? I mean, we talked about some of them, but
right. I mean, one of the, I would have no more challenges than the other grower, but I think one of them is the light aspect that we're on the north side of the property. That's a tough one to deal with this time of year, being in December. That shadow casts really far out from anything that's above us. So it's always dealing with that. And then, that's about it. Like I said, like challenges about the same for any other grower, timing, production, things like that.
So one thing, and I keep saying this, I haven't been at your place, but like just moving materials around, wheelbarrows, like you were like, we can't even think about a BCS, it's not an option. Mm-hmm. Do you think that was part of your decision to farm the way you did? Was like, how can we do this without big tools?
Yeah, well, that was my search in the beginning. Was that I knew that I was never going to be able to use like a big tiller or anything. No tractors were going to be like plowing any fields, anything like that. So I was like, there's got to be a system. So that was my search, was searching for a permanent bed system, and that's where I found Fortier's book. And then I was like, well, I can't even use the BCS. And so I was like, I did away with that. And then I found Neversink, and he was just doing his entire farm with a tilter. I went, oh, that's great. And then I found other growers who are not doing it with anything. And so I was like, we could even go with less, so it's the reduction just continues down.
Have you found more growers in your area? Because like when I was there, you were like, I don't know anyone growing like this.
Well, I just know, growing like us, the only people that are doing it like us would be Jared Real Foods. And then that's about it. Everyone else is tractor-based or just now exploring into no-till, but using no-till in a different system other than like a market garden style.
Okay, and if you guys, that's Jared Smith of Jared's Real Food, if you guys don't know who he is, and he's an amazing grower. Like, have you gone down to see his place?
I haven't, and I've been speaking with a few people that actually wanted to go visit him, but because he is the only other person doing it like us, and we should, definitely collab and hang out.
Yeah, you're going to want to do all sorts of weird stuff after you go see his place.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say. You're going to be interplanting and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But he just grows so much food in his space. It's unbelievable. Here's a question here. All right. So I got this new feature here. I can put comments on the bottom of the screen. A large area I'm wanting to start a garden in, have compost and a large amount of sand and clay. What other amendments should I be looking into? I know you mentioned some of the ones before, but you have a pretty complicated mix, and maybe some of that is not available for everybody.
Right. The one I started 3 of my field plots with straw and horse manure completely, and then but it was straw and horse manure that has aged, that had been sitting for 6+ months. And those 2 fields turned out really well. Just adding those with compost, that was when I had no idea how to use any type of soil amendments. I was just starting, and I just knew that horse manure and straw would be a good additive, and that's a great way to start. If you have access to that, I'm sure hopefully there's people around you with livestock.
Okay.
That's a great way to start.
Okay. I get some comments in here about us talking about complicated stuff, and we're like, this is no-till growers. Like, we're going to nerd out pretty hard in here.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, and it's also, I apologize, but I'm trying to catch up with Spencer too in here. Everything's changed. Um, So yeah, I not many questions here, guys. I know Spencer's got probably a very different environment than most of you guys out there, but anything in general, if you have any basic questions, feel free to fire those in. But while I'm waiting for some more questions to come in, I want to talk about hedgerows a little bit. I know you guys were just starting out with some of those systems at your farm, and I remember you were using some seed mixes. Talk a little about what's worked, what hasn't worked. If you're going to be pushing harder on this, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned before too, one of the big changes that happen for us next year is that we're going to lean more towards perennial cropping. So implementing more perennial hedgerows, absolutely, but then at the same time, within the smaller terraces, actually incorporating fruit trees in those terraces, and then growing underneath those fruit trees. I think there's like a great advantage to grow with the perennial like tree crops. The fact that they're going to produce in about 2 years, they'll produce with the most minimal amount of labor. I think that is something that is a lot of market gardeners should actually look into with outlining their property, is with a fruit tree, because not only does it diversifies your market stream as well. The fact that you now can have veg and fruit at the same time is a huge aspect. But then even you can double down on that fruit and look into doing jams, marmalades, things like that. So you're actually just diversifying that market even more with those fruit trees that are going to be producing every single year with a minimal amount of effort. So those like I said, within those hedgerows are going to be more fruit trees, more berries, things that we're going to be put in one time with minimal amount of effort, and then they'll be constantly producing cash crops every single year. With our hedgerows, we did see a huge difference in pest issues, but that was after we let pests in. And that's one thing that people tend to forget, is that even if you're using organic sprays, things like that, you're not letting a pest pressure build to the point where you need to have that pest pressure to invite the predators in, the beneficials in. If you continually diminish your own pests, there's no need for these beneficials to stick around. There's no food here. Why would I stay here? So you almost have to take that sacrifice and let that pest pressure build. As long as you have a habitat for those beneficials to hang out in, it should be, in time, okay. We were using bug nets for our brassicas and having a huge issue with caterpillars and cutworm underneath the net. And once we pulled back the net out of frustration, we have this eastern bluebird that would actually fly in and sit above the plants and just kind of hover and then swing down and snag caterpillars or cutworms out of the ground. And our pest pressure went down to where we saw that the use of bug net was almost unnecessary. But we also put in birdhouses for those. And so it's really cool to see this fall, these eastern bluebirds, they would fly up to these birdhouses and sit on it. And the male will actually sit there and wait for the female, and he'll show her the nest, and he'll kind of like go in and go out. And so you have like 4 or 5 of these eastern bluebirds just trying to get into the same birdhouse. So it's really cool to see that, if you build an ecosystem, things will come that will actually be beneficial for your farm. But yeah.
Cool. I think I like talking to growers who are implementing this, because I think it's a really strong idea and needs a lot more experimentation.
Yeah.
I also think in reality it's hard because it's extra time you're spending on stuff that, you're talking about fruit trees, but even those aren't going to give you fruit for a while. Right. And you're like, oh, do I plant more beds, do some cultivating, or set up these other systems? Are you doing herbs, flowers, or anything besides?
Herbs and flowers in those hedgerows as well too. But I'll tell you what, if I were to start my farm over from the beginning right now, I would start off with fruit trees. I would start off by planting my entire property with fruit trees, and then or tree crops, even nut trees as well too. Those are great, but and then I would go with the cash crop. Once you put in all your fruit trees, and then I go with the cash crop of veg, the quicker turnaround crops. That way by the time your veg gets up and rolling and going, you have in 2-3 years your brand's starting to be recognized, and then now you have a diversified market already with fruit.
Right. The hard part is they cost a lot of money and they don't make money right away.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. And you also live in California. So like, and go visit Jared because he's got like fruit trees growing everywhere. And I'm just like, man, it's not going to happen here. Or if you're somewhere cooler.
You could do, I mean, you'd be great for like all your stone fruits.
Yeah. We had a lot of figs growing this year that did really well.
Nice. Very nice. Love figs.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So let's get some more questions here. Some came in while we were chatting. How about worms? Have you seen a lot of worms, and how does that play into your soil life?
So I almost kind of wonder if I made an issue here, but when I first started my farm, I bought a bunch of red wiggler worms and made my own worm bin and things like that. And so when I was finished with the worm bin, I had established my first garden. I went and threw all the worms out in the field, just kind of hand casted them, threw them out there. We now have such an abundance of red worms; it's almost alarming. I kind of wonder if can you ever go to the tipping point where you have too much worms? Because I kid you not, I'll have agrabah on the ground with like a sandbag over that, and you pull up the sandbag, and I mean there are like clumps of worms that you can physically grab, and the worms are crawling over the agrabah at night. It's like, I think, because I heard that the red wiggler is the most prolific. They actually they procreate the fastest, and so versus an actual earthworm, which is going to be the longer, more deep soil. And then the red wigglers are very surface level. So I don't see too many earthworms. We see more red wigglers, but I'm not sure if you could ever have like an issue of having too much. But who knows?
I'm curious about that now too, because like those aren't like native worms for your area too, right? So do they become a pest at that point?
I don't know, dude. It's pretty, like, you can literally like take your fingers and like scratch the surface, and then you'll come up with worms. Like it's pretty fun.
Maybe that's why your soil's so good too. You know, I mean.
Yeah. But I mean, like, you can literally see the castings. If you leave it covered, and you'll see the ground it looks soft, it looks fluffed, and then it looks like the worms are just there's so much castings, and they're just doing their job. But I don't know. I've looked it up and tried to figure out if you could ever have too much worms, but so. I
mean, you have birds around, so they're probably going to keep some of them in check, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, like I said too, once we put in these birdhouses, our bird population went up extremely high. It was like noticeably how much these birds started to hang around. It's like they noticed me putting the houses up, and they're like, "Oh, this guy wants us here."
Yeah, bluebirds are like that. We have a lot of bluebirds here, and they're always hunting out the boxes, and they'll be fighting over the same one. And
I've never seen them here. And then we put these houses up, and then I noticed to see them come around more, and I was like, "This is really awesome."
Okay. Let's talk about seeds. Where do you like to get your seeds from?
So right now we are still purchasing from Johnny's, leaning more towards open pollinated. So look more towards high mowing organic and things like that.
Okay. Have you been in touch with Osborne at all?
Oh no, and you were the one that told me about them last year, or the beginning of this year. The Osborne Seed Company.
Plus, they're on the West Coast, so I figured you guys probably want to reach out to them.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
I definitely should.
I'll hook you up with that, anyways. Yeah. I'll put you in touch with Rebecca. All right, cool. Let's see here. Can you tell us more about how you adjust your spacing between plants to optimize sunlight?
I just go with the standard gritter. I mean, generally, sometimes, just keeping a good growth rate, make sure that it's not too compact, but sometimes you can't. I mean, depends on what you're trying to go for. If it's like a direct seeded crop, you don't really have to worry about it. But.
Okay, so just a lot of the spacings with the gritter and kind of the standard stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So like 4x for lettuce, like what are some other?
Yeah, 4x4 lettuce, the 2x2 for, obviously your brassicas and things like that. But then, what was it? We did one was, it's a 4x4 for kohlrabi, but then we actually 4x4 for kohlrabi, but then run it at a 3x3 on grid.
Yeah, and if you guys are interested in that tool or have it, was it on the Johnny's website maybe?
It's on Neversink's Farm Tools, and then it's on Johnny's as well too.
They have some really cool diagrams for alternative spacings. Mm-hmm. You can go crazy with that stuff. Yeah, so yeah.
It's fine. It's nice to have. Like you figure out yourself too. Like once you get the tool and you start to get the hang of it, and you start to see how the crops grow, and then you can actually start to play with the spacing yourself too, which is nice. I do recommend if you get a second handle, get 2 handles. so you don't
Okay.
have to constantly keep changing it out.
So you wind up using the 4 and the 2 most of the time?
Yeah, well, now we don't even need to use the 2 because we're like, oh,
You just use the 4.
2 years into using it, like, oh, do the math. It looks like
Don't start advertising that. Connor's not going to be happy about it. He just lost sales of his 2 buys.
Just buy the 4, yeah.
Just okay. Here's another question. Can you talk a little bit about the cost effectiveness of soil amendments versus just using deep compost mulch?
Yeah.
Like, because there's a lot of systems out there where people just put down a ton of mulch and don't use amendments. There's some where people are using a lot of amendments but not that much compost.
So we're actually, like I said before earlier when we were talking about the bed flips, just start to lean more towards that amending once and then, or amend with 1 crop and then let it sit through maybe 2 to 3 crops and then go back and amend it well. Amending with like the FERT blend I was talking about, but with compost, probably just always add compost. I'm a huge proponent of compost.
And you guys have a good source for that?
Yeah, we use San Pasqual Valley Soils. It's in here in San Diego. They have an organic blend. It's an unfinished compost. It's manure based. So it's okay. You have to figure out how to use it for your farm. The fact that it's unfinished, it comes in really hot, and then it can actually burn your transplants if you use too much of it. So we use like a light covering of it, and then go heavier with organic matter to kind of get that blend real nice. And then the microbes like skyrocket once they get blended with more organic matter because they're sitting idle with no organic matter in the compost, if that makes sense. And then they get a nice dosing of it. So the plants respond very well.
Okay. Can you talk more about the desire to get off city water because cost savings and sustainability? Is the hope soil health and production will be better once you get off city water?
Yeah, and that's another thing too. I kind of wondered if reason why we saw a big response in our plants too once we switched to overhead too, because it gives it time to off gas any type of like chloramine that would be in it. So they say that if a droplet were to, so our city water comes with chloramine. I don't know about you guys or anything like that, but which is the chemical to kill bacteria. So what they say from dropping from a hose spigot down to the ground, it has enough time to off gas the chloramine. And so once we were using the drip doesn't, it goes directly right into the soil. So in any type of soil bacteria that's alive, we're essentially going in reverse by using a drip because it's not having time to off gas. So the chloramine is actually killing the soil bacteria as well too. So once we would switch to overhead, it now has time to off gas, and it's not going in. It's not killing our soil bacteria.
Interesting. I mean, everything I've heard about, I don't know about chloramines, but I know chlorine has to sit for longer to off gas. Maybe chloramines faster.
We had a water dude come out, and he was telling us that he was telling the evaporation point of the chloramine, the off gassing point of the chloramine out of the water. It's like it's better. It's faster.
Okay.
But then, so our ultimate goal is to get rid of, we're going to be digging a reservoir and get off of city water. Like I said, too, like just seeing, I mean, in Southern California, you can almost look at our water as you could look at it as crude oil. It's going to be finite. I don't know if it'll ever run out, but the Salina valleys, they suck water. If we use that much water on our farm, I couldn't imagine how much water they're using in that valley, right? So the way I look at it is that water, I'm not sure if we'll drain our aquifers or if that's actually possible, but the restrictions will become more intense. And so they'll start to implement, and they'll become, a lot of aggression around water rights and things like that. So ultimate goal is to be self-sustaining with our own water source, if that makes sense. So digging reservoirs and then hopefully getting a well, but your wells could always dry up. Like I said, we haven't had water in 8 months, 9 months.
Yeah, so for you guys, it's not even really a water capture situation. I mean, and then I feel like when it does rain, you probably don't get a lot of rain, right?
We got, like I said, we got 7 inches last year.
All right, but I'm just saying, if you captured 7 inches on your landscape, like that's not that much water.
No, not in a comparison to what we're using. No, that's what I'm saying. So it's just you take what you can get type thing, but then trying to figure out, like another thing too is that your perennial crops, they don't use as much water. So looking at these systems and just thinking long term, like is what we're doing right now is if the water runs out. One, if it runs out, it's not very practical to hang around here anyways. But are you obviously if you have more fruit and nut trees, you'll be better off than a person who's growing lettuce.
Yeah, I think you're probably. I mean, I don't remember having a lot of like earthworks to capture water at your farm, but you have so much organic matter around. I mean, there's tons of mulch, obviously all the beds. I
Yeah.
feel like you're probably grabbing most of the water when it rains.
Yeah. I mean, we heavy mulch all of our pathways, things like that. So our runoff is almost at minimal now too, which is nice. And then yeah, I mean, and then the way we have our terraces too is that they're kind of situated where they hold the water and they saturate through, which is nice. And yeah, so storing is the best we could to our possible. Like if I had known more about, saving water and about, growing food in different ways when I started, I probably would have shaped the farm a little different too. But hey, I'm like learning as I go, reading more books, things like that.
Have you done any foliar applications?
Mm-mm.
Anything, or I'll extend that question then, like compost teas, anything like that?
So we're gonna be looking into definitely more compost teas and more teas in general. From I forgot that one gentleman. He came out with a book at the beginning of this year, and he had a lot of recipes for Korean natural farming teas.
Okay.
I forgot what it was. I was gonna get his book because I would listen to him on the No Till podcast, and I was really like enjoying what he was saying and how he goes about it. But yeah, so looking into that definitely. Yeah.
Cool. Mainland Garden says you should start harvesting the worms and selling them.
At this point, I could. I thought about that. You can pick up a ball like this big of worms, like every like 5 feet. It's insane. Ridiculous.
Okay. Pharmacy Seeds Network. You guys are always in here for the Growers Live. Thanks for showing up. They said you can't have too many. One grower of onions reported worms stealing onion starts.
Oh, really? Nice. Well, that's good to know that we can't have too many.
Yeah, I guess so.
One or two, because sometimes, like with the smaller direct seeds, if I leave the agribond tight on it, I kind of wonder if the worms start to eat the new seed leaf, the new emergence coming out, because there will be times where I'll pull back the agribond and the worms are very surface, and then I'm like, are they eating the new the crop? It's super like annoying.
Yeah, but there's a lot of cases like that in the world where someone will grab some plant or something that's not native and throw it out there, and then all of a sudden it's like becomes a problem. It wasn't like purposeful,
Exactly.
and you're thinking like worms are good, and then you're like, oh man, there's too many worms.
Yeah, I had no idea. Well, I had no. I mean, back then I had no idea there was even more than one worm, more than one type of worm.
Right, absolutely. What are some upgrades you guys are looking into? I know you mentioned that 14 by 100 foot tunnel. Is your like wash station all dialed in at this point? I feel like it was like mostly finished when I was there, but
Yeah. Wash station is getting there. We're insulating it for winter at this point. But what was it? We started to dig a root cellar underneath the wash pack house. So out where the deck stood out over on the landscape, you can see it in the video in the beginning. But underneath that, we're actually digging a root cellar to extend our cold storage. So we'll be implementing that, which is kind of cool, kind of more of a natural way of storing your root crops, things like that. Let's think of anything else. I mean, that's about it. Yeah.
okay.
Few things going on. The water program is new, which is nice for catching all the water inside the pack house. Anything being washed inside the pack house is now all the water going on the ground goes right into the tank, and we're storing it. So there's no wasted water in the pack house. Since we're purchasing scent, we want to keep it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Here's a question from Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
And guys, if you're watching, please hit the like button, and we'll take a couple more questions here. We've been going for about an hour or so, but Jerry wants to know: do you just visit different restaurant managers and ask what produce they need or grow and then see if they want it? It's like if you're getting started, just some tips for selling to restaurants. I know your situation right now with restaurants, but
yeah. So yeah, if you were to approach a new restaurant, I recommend just showing up with a box of sample of stuff, things that that you're going to have weekly, and you're confident that you're not going to have a high-low in production, because once a restaurant a chef starts working with you, they want to have a reliable source. They like that it's routine. But if you break the routine, they're not going to be comfortable with working with you. But yeah, so bringing a box of veggies, things that you're confident you're going to have every single week, and then just breaking that ice, because it's super hard to walk in. I'm not a fan of that, but you got to just go in, and then also social media helps too with researching the restaurants you want to work with, and then linking up with them through social media, just kind of telling them that you're a new farm. An email reach out would be great too prior to coming in. Actually, forget about that. That'd be probably way better than walking in.
Yeah, I think I have a video on my channel. It's called like how to sell to chefs. If you guys want to check that out. Um, and I think all those things that Spencer said are good. Another one is don't walk in during service hours.
Yeah.
Obviously, COVID's very different right now, but don't walk in at noon or at 5 o'clock when they're making lunch and dinner.
Yeah.
I think one thing that is you hit on was social media. Like, get your social media account dialed in, make yourself look successful, make yourself look like you're growing a lot of food.
Yeah.
And then when you reach out, the first thing anyone's going to do is check your Instagram.
Yeah.
So if that looks good, then they're going to be interested. And I think anything you can do to network and get someone's name and say, oh, Spencer told me that you might be looking for lettuce.
Right.
The chef's name is Joe or whatever.
Yeah.
That has been really helpful for me. But I think it's very intimidating, Spencer. I mean, I don't know if it was a long time ago or not for you, but a lot of farmers are more introverts also. And so going out and selling is not our favorite job at all.
No.
And it's terrifying. And I think like when you get one or two accounts and then you have a little more confidence, you can go in and be like, okay, I'm on at this place. They're buying lettuce from me.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just, you just got to put yourself out there a little bit.
Yep.
Do you have any like crazy stories about that getting started?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's some here in San Diego. We have some chefs that are. I mean, we work with some of the top chefs in San Diego. We work with a Michelin star restaurant, and going in there was pretty intimidating. I mean, you go in there and it's like a stainless steel copper, just the most beautiful place ever. And then we work with other restaurants where you go in and they're playing rap music and having a ball. You go into one that's like singing still and they got like classical music and a little chopping going on, and then next thing they got like rap music. And it's cool to see different cultures. It's like a whole different world, but it's fun.
I really like working with chefs a lot. And I think for me, I was a brewer for 5 years and I spent a couple years brewing in brew pubs. And so I was working with the chefs a lot and I got a lot more comfortable hanging out in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Cause if you've never worked in a restaurant, eat front house or back of house, like it is a different experience being in a commercial kitchen. Yep. So now when I walk into restaurants, I don't feel awkward about it. Okay. But yeah, every restaurant is like, you get to know the chefs, the sous chefs, like all the dishwashers, like they all know who you are. And then, you walk in there, it's always like a different experience. That's hilarious, that rap music to classical.
Yeah, it's so funny. And then like the vibe of the people too, like, oh, what's up? To like, hey, how's it going?
Yeah. Okay, so what do you think you're going to do now with the restaurants sort of tightening up?
I mean, like I said, it's just kind of it's been super hard. That's the most aggravating parts of this whole thing about COVID is that the planning in production is like there's so much highs and so much lows, and then when they do come back online in San Diego, we're all shut down. We're back down to zero. Where I think they even canceled takeout, so you have to be. I think they did.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's. Oh no, takeout still, but you cannot sit in or dine out outside of the restaurant. So there's no, the restaurant is completely closed unless it's takeout, whatever. But yeah, it's just for crop production. It's been hell because it's so high and so low. But we'll see. I mean, it's just kind of going forward.
Okay.
New challenge. Accepted.
Seems you got the right attitude, man. This year's worn a lot of us out. I hear you. And I know that we were talking about this a little bit before we started, but I think there was a huge push. Maybe you can speak on this a little bit. Like in March.
Oh yeah.
In April, people were like, "Okay, I want to be healthy. I'm scared of the food system falling apart because I don't know about supply chain. I don't even know how to grow food." A lot of people started doing that. What do you think is going to be like for next year in terms of like local food production, maybe home gardening? Like, how do you feel about that?
I mean, that's one thing that we want to look into too is actually opening up workshops on the farm too. So having people come out, but obviously do it in like a COVID safe manner. But being able to teach people how to be good stewards and how to grow food with non-petroleum based products. So you can grow a lot of food without using any type of fuel. Our entire farm is ran with no petroleum based products, and there's a lot of people out there who say that you can't do it, and it's like, well, we're doing it. So just kind of getting that out there to letting people know that it's possible, but teaching home gardeners too, because I think it's important that people know how to grow their own food and rely on themselves.
Yeah, I see that. Like the home gardening space, and you talk to anyone on the supply side of this, like you talk seeds, compost. It's crazy this year.
Kind of weird what's going on with Johnny's too, and how their processing is so behind. I don't know if you've been ordering from them at all, but they're having a really hard time keeping up with demand, I believe.
What, like right now?
Yeah.
Don't tell me this. I got to place a seed order.
It's like ridiculous how long it takes to get it now.
Okay, good to know.
They have like a 2 to 3 day holding period before they even process your order.
Because I know, like in April, they stopped selling to anyone that wasn't a commercial account for a while too.
Yeah. That's pretty intense to think about too. And what I was assuming is that they might have used up a lot of stock, so that means they got to the point where they were like, okay, we're using up too much seed. Where they're not going to have seed for the remainder of the year, and so they had to put a restriction on that, which I was like, that's pretty intense.
Well, if you're a commercial grower and, like you're trying to get Salanova, for example, like you expect them to have Salanova all year. Your business depends on it.
Yep. And they're out of stock for a long time on that. It was really hard to get it. We had to switch our Salanova to something else.
That's interesting. I'm going to reach out. To my rep at Johnny's, but I know I was talking to Rebecca Morse. She's one of the salespeople at Osborne, and I was asking her about this recently, and she said that it wasn't an issue for them about like there being a seed shortage in general. They just didn't have what they needed in stock to meet demand. So that she was saying, at least maybe their scale's different. I don't know, but she was saying it's not like an overall seed shortage. It was just like they didn't have what they needed for, like they sold 5x or 10x what they normally sell. They didn't have that lined up. Like they didn't have it
coming. It wasn't gonna be. It was the seed was coming. They didn't have it in stock. Is that what she said? Is that what you said?
Yeah, they just they make their plans for the year. And
what my concern was, like I said, is that Johnny's is a bigger name, and so they had, you have everyone that was like, oh, looks up seeds, and then you have Johnny's pops up, and so you have more, the common Joe purchasing seeds.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens, but that's good to know. I know, like, a lot of people got shorted on stuff. I know, like, I think Jesse was like ordered potatoes, and they didn't even send him a replacement, and then.
I tried to get potatoes, and I was like, nope, gone. Every single place I went to look for potatoes is gone. I was like, I'm not going to potatoes then.
Yeah, it was like that with sweet potatoes down around here. I have a great local store that, I don't know, takes care of people. They've been working. They're exhausted. Like, it's unbelievable. Let's see here. We got a couple more questions, guys, and then we'll probably close it out. Let's see. We got Abigail and Jamie. Oh, this is a question for me. Have I ordered from So True Seed? I have not. I know who they are. I haven't tried their products before. So we'd mentioned Johnny's, and you mentioned High Mowing, and I mentioned Osborne. Fedco is another good one. If you haven't tried Fedco before, they're a co-op in New England, and their seed prices are great.
There's Row 7, but Row 7 is more of like a chef-based seed company. They got some cool stuff. I can't think of anything else.
Are you saving any seed, or do you have plans for that at all?
So we're switching to
OP.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Anything else, Spencer? You want to talk about, or?
That's about it. Yeah. Good.
That's about it, huh? We covered stuff like all over the place tonight. So great conversation, Spencer. Thank you so much. I have links down below in the description for anyone to check out your social media and give you some love over there. So Spencer, I appreciate your time, and great catching up, and good luck with going in the winter with COVID and your sales and stuff. But I know you said challenge accepted. So
yeah, exactly. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care. All right, guys. Well, that's it for, there's Spencer. Nope. Sorry about that. That's it for this evening. Big thanks to Spencer and having him on, and it's always good to chat with him. And I really appreciate you guys with the support and coming out tonight and watching this. Hopefully you guys have been enjoying these shows. We'll be back in 2 weeks, and hopefully everyone's staying safe and being well out there, guys. And we'll see you soon.